Hello, and welcome to the Baker Files, where two generations take on true crime from two different perspectives. I'm Adrianne, and I'm here with my son and co-host Tyler.
What's up, everyone?
Each episode, we open a new file and examine the crimes, the choices, and the questions that leave us wondering why. We don't claim to have all the answers. We're simply a mom and son looking at the same case through two different lenses. And today's case raises an especially difficult question. How can someone be given moments of apparent freedom, yet remain completely trapped? And before we really dive into this episode does discuss kidnapping, prolonged captivity, sexual violence, torture, and psychological abuse. We're going to avoid unnecessary graphic detail, but this case may still be difficult for some listeners, so I just want to kind of warn everybody on that part. This story is of a person who was a prisoner who behind locked doors, in chains, and in a wooden box. It also had fear that Cameron Hooker spent years building inside Colleen Stan's head. So it was multiple prisons. And this is a story of a young woman who survived more than 7 years in captivity and the psychological manipulation that made escape feel impossible. Today, we're opening the file on Colleen Stan, often referred to in the media as the girl in the box. And as we go through this, I avidly watch true crime shows. I watch shows, FBI profiler shows, if you know which one I'm talking about. And they actually did an episode with a lot of the themes from this story. So it all started on May 19th of 1977. Colleen Stan was only 20 years old. She was traveling from Eugene, Oregon to Westwood, California, where she planned to attend a friend's birthday party. At the time, hitchhiking was far more common than it is today. Pretty much today, you do not hitchhike, right? Like that is something you are told never to do. Back then, it was a common thing.
Yeah, anybody in my generation, that's not even a thing at all whatsoever. Never once in my mind have I ever thought that if I needed to be somewhere or I was stranded, hitchhiking would be the last resort.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that probably just from all the stuff that's happened back in the day,
Yeah. You can't trust strangers anymore, sadly. So Colleen, she had hitchhiked before. She believed she knew how to evaluate the people offering her a ride, right? She thought she could read people. She reportedly turned down at least 2 rides before a blue van stopped for her. Inside were 23-year-old Cameron Hooker, his wife Janice, and their baby, little family. And the fact that it appeared to be a family made the situation feel safer to her, right? Oh, it's a family. It's a wife, a kid.
Yeah, no, that's valid.
It wasn't just a strange man in a van. There was a woman and baby with him, which probably made Colleen think this is a normal young family. He's a normal guy. And that's exactly why this is an important point. It can be easy to look back at a case and question a victim's decision, right? Why did they get in the van? Why did they do what they do? Why did they turn down that road? But Colleen did attempt to assess the situation. She saw a married couple traveling with their child and interpreted that as a sign of safety.
Yeah, I don't really blame her. I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but when I was a kid and I'd be left alone for a second, or for example, you had to run into the store real quick and all of a sudden I would be just super hyper focused about who was around me as a kid for some reason. I don't know why. I always had this weird fear of being kidnapped as a kid. But whenever I saw somebody with a kid, it immediately made me feel better. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's a weird thing, but so
did I leave you alone all that much?
No. I'm just using it as an example. Yeah. You just running into the store or something, but
right. Yeah, definitely makes you feel oh, that's a mom. That's a dad.
Yeah.
They have to care about another person so that they can't be bad, right?
Right.
So during the drive, they stopped at a gas station. Colleen went inside and later remembered feeling an instinct that she should leave. So there was a twinge there where she was maybe I shouldn't do this. But she returned to the van. A short time later, Cameron left the main road and drove toward an isolated area. He stopped the vehicle, threatened Colleen with a knife, restrained her, and placed a heavy wooden box over her head. So just her head was inside a box. The box blocked her sight and restricted her ability to hear and breathe comfortably. The young couple and their baby had never been Colleen's protection. They had been part of the trap.
Oh, God. Was it like a cardboard box or like what kind of?
No, wooden box.
Oh, geez.
Like full-on wooden box around her head. So hearing that Janice and her baby helped make Cameron appear safe, how responsible do you think Janice was from the beginning?
Janice, the wife?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, she was a complete co-conspirator.
Do you think that, or do you think she was a victim too?
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to find out more.
That's one of the questions we'll keep returning to. Janice would later describe herself as another person controlled and abused by Cameron, but she was also present when Colleen was abducted, and she participated in keeping her captive for 7 years. Both of those things can exist within the same case, right? Which makes her role extremely complicated, but it does not erase the harm she helped cause. Before Colleen entered their lives, Cameron and Janice Hooker already had an abusive and deeply disturbing relationship. Cameron had subjected her to violence, torture, sexual violence. According to her testimony, Cameron wanted to abduct another woman whom he could completely control. Janice agreed to let him do it, reportedly believing that it would redirect some of his abuse away from her. So she was just looking for relief, from what she said.
Right. It doesn't make her any less guilty, but
yeah,
she's still a victim in all of it, But
right. It definitely does not excuse what she did, but it might help explain and help us understand Janice's thinking through it, right?
Just surviving in the only way that she knew how.
Yep. Instead of seeking help or protecting another woman, Janice remained with Cameron and became involved in Colleen's captivity. After the kidnapping, Colleen was taken to the Hooker's home near Red Bluff, California. Over time, Cameron established an increasingly strict system of control. Colleen was isolated, restrained, deprived of basic comforts, threatened, and subjected to repeated physical and sexual violence. We are deliberately not going to describe every event. The essential fact is that Cameron used pain, humiliation, unpredictability, and fear to dismantle Colleen's sense of control over her own life.
No worries.
The object that would eventually give Colleen's case its widely known name was a coffin-like wooden box. For extended periods, Colleen was confined inside a box kept beneath the Hooker's bed.
Jesus.
At times, she reportedly remained inside it for as many as 23 hours a day. Imagine having no ability to move, no natural light, little sense of time, and no way of knowing when the person controlling you might return. And she could hear the family living what looked like an ordinary life just above her. Their children were in the home. People came and went. Neighbors were nearby. And yet Colleen was hidden beneath the bed. That may be one of the most unsettling parts of this case, because from outside the home, Cameron and Janice appeared to be living a relatively ordinary life. Inside, another human being had been reduced to something they believed they owned. But Cameron understood that physical restraint alone might not be enough forever, so he created something even more powerful. He created the company. Cameron told Colleen that he believed to belonged to a large and powerful secret organization called the Company. According to him, this organization monitored her constantly. If she attempted to escape, contact police, or told anyone what was happening, members of the Company would find her. He told her they would punish her and harm the people she loved. The Company did not exist, but Colleen had no way of knowing that. She had been isolated, tortured, and conditioned to believe Cameron controlled every part of her world. He reinforced the story until the threat became real to her, even though the organization itself was imaginary. Cameron also forced Colleen to sign what he called a slavery contract. The document had no legal meaning, of course, but it strengthened the illusion that a larger system was involved. This is where the case becomes difficult for people on the outside to understand. Over time, Colleen was occasionally allowed outside. She performed household chores, cared for the Hooker's children, worked in the yard, and even eventually was permitted to work at a motel.
My God.
At one point, she was even allowed to visit her family. She did not tell them what was happening, and she still did not run. This is where people might ask, why didn't she just leave? But that question ignores what years of abuse and conditioning can do to someone. We got to remember, she was in captivity a total of 7 years. From Colleen's perspective, leaving didn't necessarily mean freedom. Cameron had convinced her that leaving would result in her family being murdered. The better question is not why didn't she leave? It's what had been done to her that made leaving feel impossible, right? Cameron created a world in which obedience seemed like the only way Colleen could keep herself and her family alive. So with those threats of people that she loved.
Right. I'm just really struggling wrapping my head around. Yeah, there was anybody in their right mind would immediately take the opportunity to escape or
Right?
It's just genuinely
So this
the
is a good
idea
question.
of what the mind creates.
Right. So do you think
And the perception of their own reality,
Yeah. So this is a good question, though. Do you think psychological control can sometimes be even more effective than a locked door?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think psychological control can sometimes be even more effective than a locked door?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I mean, is like your perception is reality and what you perceive is, everybody sees the world in a different way, and especially under such cognitive and psychological distress. Oh, yeah.
Especially if you have, so if their loved ones were being threatened, right? So like say someone kidnapped me and said, I'm going to kill Tyler if you don't do what I say. Like if you don't abide by this rule and you don't do this, like, well, no, I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
But, someone's going to kill your mom. Someone's going to kill, I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill everybody that you love. I'm going to kill your granddaughter. I'm going to kill, those that are maybe not able to fight back. Like, I'm going to do anything in my power not to have that happen.
Right.
But, I don't know. And years of it, not just, I kidnap you 2 days later, I'm going to kill your mom. Like, you're going to try to figure out some way to get out of it.
No, there's definitely, I think it weighs on, some people are going to assess the risk and take action. Others are going to do what Colleen did and unfortunately submit and eventually come to believe the lies that were being fed to her. And it's just really unfortunate that it just happened to be the right person for this person, this monster, this demon to be able to control. Because that's not going to work on everybody.
No.
And it just so happened that was the case. And that's just very, very, very sad. And that 7 years, my goodness, that is.
But I think too, even not just the right person, the right type of control.
Right. And that's such a crazy twist because you hear of cases of people being kept in captivity for such and such years and it being such prolonged, extended periods of time, but they're never allowed to see their family. They're never in contact with anybody but the perpetrator or there's never any, because it's like they would immediately try to escape. So the fact that this person was completely manipulated through the worst means possible to that extent, that's just wild.
Yeah. I think that's too why we need to be careful when judging victims of captivity or even domestic violence, right?
No,
because
right.
you're
And that's
living
not
in
what I was
that
coming
home
to. I was saying
24/7.
other people would take action and she didn't. That's what I'm saying is I think it depends
But I think what I mean is, oftentimes we think automatically, oh, you're in an abusive relationship. Why don't you just leave? It's not as simple as that.
And it's, because you're trying to assert yourself in a situation. And whether you have experience in that or not, most of the time when people say that, they don't. And so they don't quite grasp the whole situation and they're not able to, they're from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
They never experienced anything like that themselves. And so it's hard to sympathize with something that you don't have any experience in. And so, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. We know the company was fictional because we're looking at the case from the outside. But Colleen only had Cameron's version of reality reinforced by years of very real punishment. And I'm sure Janice
No, absolutely
played into that as well, right? She was going to go
reinforce
along with
it for sure.
Yeah. So you got 2 people who were basically your only contact, I'm sure, for years, because I'm sure it took years and years for them to let her go outside and let her out and let her be free, quote unquote, right?
It's almost like cultish in the same way as the way that these fanatical cults back in the day, ultimately brainwashed people into believing these just incredibly outlandish things. So it's you find the right method. You
Yes.
find the right ingredients to pick apart somebody's mind, and the things you can do is insane.
Mhm. Yeah, and it took Cameron, he had that time. He had that time to see, okay, physically, we're going to start with the physical abuse,
Yeah.
and then we're going to go and do the mental abuse. So he found what worked for her, right?
Tragic.
Yeah. So several years into her captivity, Colleen was allowed to visit her family. Of course, Cameron went with her and presented himself as her fiancé. Photographs from the visit showed Colleen and Cameron together, appearing outwardly normal. Her family believed something was wrong. Because of her long absence and unusual behavior, they wondered whether she had become involved in a cult. Right? So you picked up on that.
Was there a missing persons report? Was there?
I'm sure.
Like, she just up and went missing. So all of a sudden, she just shows up with some random guy.
Well, I'm sure at some point he let her contact them with him there.
I would imagine, because otherwise there'd be a whole investigation and whatnot,
They had to have been like, oh, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm here, I'm just gonna, I'm whatever story they concocted to do that.
Yeah.
So Colleen did not reveal the truth, of course, even during moments when Cameron was not directly beside her with her family. And I think that part shows just how completely his control had become. She was physically near the people who loved her, but mentally she was still inside the prison he had built. Colleen later explained that she feared Cameron and the company so deeply that she believed speaking out would place her family in danger. After the visit, she returned with Cameron to his home. To someone unfamiliar with coercive control, that may be difficult to comprehend, but her return was not evidence that she wanted to be with him. It was evidence of how successfully he had terrorized her. By 1984, the situation within the Hooker household began to change. Cameron reportedly wanted Colleen to become a second wife. For Janice, that appeared to have been the turning point. That was her hard
Oh, that
line.
did it, huh?
Yeah, that was her hard line. Janice began to reveal more of the truth to Colleen, including information that weakened Cameron's story about the company. Once Colleen began to understand that Cameron's power was not as unlimited as he claimed, the psychological walls started to weaken. In August of 1984, after more than 7 years of captivity, Colleen left. She went to a bus station and called Cameron to tell him she was leaving. She then returned to her family. However, neither Colleen nor Janice immediately went to the police. So she just left and went home and went on their way. Colleen later did explain that Janice had asked her to give Cameron an opportunity to change. That detail is another reminder of how complicated the aftermath of coercive control can be. Leaving the physical environment does not instantly undo years of conditioning. Several months later, Janice did finally go to the authorities. She disclosed what Cameron had done to Colleen and provided investigators with information that helped build the case against him. Janice also made another horrifying allegation. She claimed that before Colleen's kidnap, she and Cameron had abducted a 19-year-old woman named Marie Elizabeth Spanicki. Marie disappeared from Chico, California in January of 1976. According to Janice, Cameron tortured and killed Marie before burying her body in a remote location. Investigators searched but were unable to locate Marie's remains. Cameron was never charged with the murder, and her disappearance officially remains unresolved. That raises the possibility that Colleen was not the first woman Cameron targeted, and also if he killed her in front of Janice, that just kind of even more dug in that he could do that for Janice, and maybe that was why she was more afraid and went along with it. We don't know. But because Marie's body was never found and no murder conviction follows, we need to distinguish between what Janice alleged and what was proven in court, right? So we don't know about that. Marie deserves to be remembered, but we should not present an allegation as a legal finding just because she said that that's what he did.
Right.
Cameron Hooker went on trial in 1985. Colleen testified about the kidnapping, captivity, torture, sexual violence, and psychological manipulation she endured. The defense attacked her credibility and focused heavily on the occasions when she had been outside the home but had not escaped. In other words, Colleen's trauma response was used against her. The defense essentially asked jurors to believe that because she had experienced moments when physical escape might have been possible, she must not have been held against her will. Prosecutors countered that Cameron's psychological control in itself was a form of imprisonment. Janice testified for the prosecution after receiving immunity. That immunity agreement remains one of the most controversial elements of the case. Her testimony was instrumental in convincing Cameron, but it also meant she avoided any prosecution despite her involvement in Colleen's abduction and captivity. Right? Cameron was convicted of kidnapping and multiple sexual assault charges in November of 1985, and he was sentenced to 104 years in prison. Good. At sentencing, the judge described him as the most dangerous psychopath he had ever encountered. So, do you believe granting Janice immunity was justified if it was necessary to convict Cameron?
Under the guise of which she was ultimately in the same psychological despair and delusion that he created. Like, yeah, I mean, she was, I guess, just as much of a victim as Colleen was. Obviously not. You can't justify. Right. It's hard because it's like.
Yeah, I struggle with that.
Yeah, but she's still there was so much that could have been done. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just at some point you have to kind of believe that you chose to do harm to somebody else, and that's what you would want. Like, when you think about good and evil, and you think about what's the right thing to do, in a story, what would happen? It's like you would never allow somebody else to go through what you're going through. You know what I mean? You have, in the same respect of how we were just talking about before, of somebody on the outside looking in, be like, oh, just leave from the abusive relationship. And I said, most of those people don't have the sympathy. Well, Janice had full
she knew exactly.
And still allowed another innocent woman to
go through it. Everything.
Put through hell.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's why it's not, I don't think it is justified.
Right.
They both should have done something.
Yeah, I struggle with that too.
Ultimately the fact that, the better of two evils, I guess, is that he ultimately got convicted and, pretty much life in prison. But no, she absolutely deserves some type of.
Yeah, I mean, she participated in Colleen's captivity.
That's
and the
just my thing. I think whether she was part of it or not, or just a victim, no, you knew what was going on, and you still allowed somebody to be.
And the final breaking point was because he wanted to bring her in as a second wife.
Yep,
that was the breaking
jealousy thing.
It was a jealousy thing, not someone else's suffering. It was,
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what she said is that she thought the abuse on her side would be abstained in some way or be lesser than because his focus wouldn't be as much on her. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, she doesn't deserve to be. But that's the thing. That's not the question. Is it justified? Because he did.
But I think you have to look at all of it, though, to see if it's justified, right? You have to look at all of that. Yes, she was in her mind saving herself from the abuse, but by subjecting someone else, was that okay? And then getting immunity for bringing it out, after she had already released Colleen, basically, by telling her the truth.
Honestly, ultimately, I do think that it is justified. Do I agree with it? No.
Right.
Was she the instigator when it came to committing the crimes? Was she the one? Would she go out there and then do that with somebody else? Probably not. Could, under the horrible wrong circumstances, but this was obviously Cameron's doing, and just manipulated this girl. And obviously she made some very poor decisions in the whole situation. So ultimately him going down is the biggest deal. But yeah, it's still not. She's not scot-free. She's not innocent by any means.
No, absolutely not. So where the case stands today, changes in California sentencing rules eventually made Cameron eligible for release earlier than his original sentence suggested. He left the traditional prison system in 2021, but remained in state custody while prosecutors sought to have him legally classified as a sexually violent predator. In June of 2026, a California jury found that Cameron Hooker met the criteria for that designation. That decision means he remains confined in state custody rather than being released into the community. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Colleen advocated against his release and reportedly testified during those proceedings. Nearly half a century after the kidnapping, she was once again required to confront the possibility that the man who imprisoned her might become free. So she had to live it all again. Not that I'm sure she lives it all, anyway, but to have to go through that again. Colleen's life after captivity. Colleen's story did not end when Cameron was convicted. She rebuilt her life, pursued an education, worked, raised a family, and supported organizations that help survivors of abuse. She has also spoken publicly about what happened to her, helping people understand the reality of coercive control. The media label, Girl in the Box, may be how many people recognize the case, but Colleen Stan is more than the box Cameron built. She was a young woman whose freedom was stolen. She was a survivor who endured something almost impossible to comprehend, and she was a person who eventually reclaimed her life.
Good for her.
Yeah.
I think that's really important in being outspoken about certain traumas and being able to find others that can have some kind of solace in your story,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, one of the biggest lessons with this case is that captivity doesn't always look the way we expect it to, right? Like a person may not be chained every moment. They may go to work, visit family, or appear in public and still be living completely under control. Because like you think kidnapped, you think you're living in the basement, never to be seen for 7 years.
Right.
But that's not always the case, right? Because of course, then there's Janet. Was she a victim of Cameron? Evidence suggests she was subjugated to his abuse and control as well. So that comes back to both of them. If they're victims, why didn't Janice leave? Why didn't Colleen leave? Obviously, Cameron had some really good persuasion skills. He was
I was going to say, we haven't really talked
person.
enough about him.
Yeah.
Because my immediate thought was to do something as this that goes beyond your normal, idea of a normal psychopathic killer that goes on these killing sprees and this and that, but to subject somebody to such harsh, beyond harsh cruelty. Like, obviously ending somebody's life is the worst, but they always say, like, there's always worse things than death.
Mm-hmm.
7 years of just physical and mental and sexual abuse just day by day by day. That is arguably worse than some of the fates that others have met in terms of being victims to these, psychopaths. And so this person was just utterly about control, completely narcissistic in the truest form. And it wouldn't surprise me if you said her name was Marie, that Janice had said that he had done. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not, unfortunately, a long shot to believe.
Yeah. Probably not the first one. There might have been more before. We don't really know much about Cameron.
Imagine a woman they did that to and didn't, necessarily keep in captivity, but abused and put in situations and then dumped them off. It seems like in every case, there's always, that's what's terrifying, is, there's only so much that you know about.
Especially back then. I mean, she was abducted in 1977. Marie was, disappeared in 1976.
Right.
So if he was, he was 22, 23, he probably started when he was a teenager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if this is something, it's not something that usually just pops up overnight. He was 23 years old when he kidnapped, psychologically tortured, physically tortured. I mean, he was young. So he did this at 23. That was not his first foray into anything with being, doing this. He had to have practiced. He had to have seen. There's no way he would have just, And Janice was obviously someone that he manipulated
right. No,
as
that's
well.
what I'm saying.
Obviously.
I'm thinking like, I don't want to be hypocritical when I'm saying, because it's like, I have no sense even beginning to understand what it's like to be in a situation. But yeah, how do you not just leave that,
Mhm.
and it's just like, yeah, it's terrifying when somebody has that genuine ability and desire to manipulate, because it can be so destructive.
Very much so. Very much so. Can make you believe many different things, many different ways. I mean, they said that term gaslighting, that's been, something that's newer,
Right.
but it's been going around forever, but makes you feel like makes you doubt your own thoughts because they're telling, no, that's not right. That's not, I mean, that happens so much in abusive relationships. They make you feel like they are the one that knows. They are, the end all be all. You'll never have nobody will want you, like just breaks you down. And you hear this day after day after day constantly with no other, I mean, she had no other, and that's what they do. They isolate you. Even like in an abusive relationship, a lot of times, they start to isolate you from your family, from your friends, so that you
become dependent and there's no outlets and there's no escape.
They are your whole world.
They become everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it definitely, for Janice and for Colleen, I'm sure Janice was at that point as well.
Well, thank goodness she was able to get out.
Yeah.
In some capacity, because I'm sure that there's plenty of stories where that's not the case.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll never know, some people, there's so many missing women out there, so many missing people out there that sadly we'll never know.
Yeah.
And just, I think about this stuff. And so, driving through a neighborhood, seeing somewhere with a basement, you think you drive through somewhere and you're like, I wonder what's going on, because you never know what's going on in the neighbor's house. You never know what's going on behind closed doors.
Oh,
you never know what's going on in that barn.
You would be so taken aback by everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The things that goes on behind. Yeah. No.
Absolutely. You never know. Yeah. So, I mean, Colleen Stan survived more than 7 years of captivity, but her story should not be remembered only because of what Cameron Hooker did to her. It should also be remembered because she endured. She escaped his control, she testified against him, and then she went on to build a life beyond the identity that he forced upon her. The physical box was real, the imaginary company was not, but both were prisoners, and overcoming the second may have been even harder than escaping the first. I think, her going on and living a great life and advocating and being, is the best outcome that we've had in any of our stories so far.
Yeah, and I think that truly showcases, for anybody that may scrutinize the fact that she didn't leave at the time, like that goes to show that her afterwards, what she did, what she accomplished, and what she stood for means more than anybody could say of what they would do in that situation, or they think they could have handled it better, or blase. No, absolutely. She is more powerful beyond measure in that respect, because most people wouldn't be able to recover from the PTSD, from the trauma, from the things that come from being in that situation. So
yeah, I think especially back in the 80s, because she was released in 85, PTSD wasn't a thing. It was only for soldiers coming back from war. Like it wasn't
right. There was no trauma victims, stuff like that.
Like there is now. There's so much advocacy and outreach. So good for her to pretty much probably do it on her own a lot. I'm sure she went to counseling. I'm sure she had people to talk to, and I'm sure. But back in the 80s, it was not. Mental health was not a thing.
Yeah,
it was something that you hide and you don't talk about. So good for her coming out, because we got to think about that happened that long ago, and she's still thriving and still, doing great. So, I mean, just amazing. So that brings us to the end of another episode of the Baker Files. The case may be closed for today, but the questions, the choices, and the why behind it all are what keep these stories with us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the Baker Files and leave us a rating or review. It really helps us get more listeners to find the show. You can find us on Instagram at the Baker Files Podcast and TikTok at the Baker Files, where we share episode updates, case discussions, and more. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. I'm Adrianne.
I'm Tyler. Thanks for listening, everybody. Catch you next time.
Until next time, we're closing the file.